everyone, and welcome to LDAYS Plugged In. My name is Anthony.
And I'm Angelica.
And we are the co-hosts of this podcast, presented to you by the Learning Disabilities Association of York-Simcoe. Before we get into discussing the awaited topic, let's dive into a little bit about ourselves.
Hey everyone, I'm Angelica, and I was diagnosed with a learning disability at the age of 6. Life was really hard, and I didn't know what was going to happen for my future. Later on in life, I found the LDAYS, where I can share my story and help many others, especially the youth today, to give them that encouragement and motivation. And I'm happy to work along with Anthony, my co-host, to have these amazing opportunities to share our stories.
My name is Anthony, and when I was 13 years old, my world changed forever because that was the year that I was diagnosed with a learning disability. While many years have passed since then, I never forgot the initial feelings that it caused. I was specifically diagnosed with what is now known as inattentive ADHD, along with a subset of dyscalculia. I spent several years after that trying to hide this aspect of myself until finally I couldn't take it anymore and decided to embrace a new approach, which is what led me to the LDAYS. I've now been happily volunteering with them, sharing my story, and getting to do fun projects like this, all because of that change I went through, and I will always remain appreciative of that. Even though Angelica and I have not known each other for a long time, it feels like we have. I think we find each other to be very conversational, and since we both noticed this about each other, it led to doing a project like this. Our technical first episode of this podcast was actually just a little while ago for the 5th annual parent conference this year. This was an amazing and informative event where we had the chance to support parents with children in post-secondary education by sharing our experiences, tips, and resources.
And most of the time, when LDs and development are discussed, the educational and learning aspects are often the core focuses. And while those are certainly important grounds to cover, they are not the only ones. Furthermore, cliche as it sounds, humans are social creatures that crave connection and understanding from those who share the same experiences, which is precisely why we created this podcast.
Much of our learning, and often the realities we create for ourselves, such as our sense of self and our identities, stem from our social interactions, including the ways through which they occur, such as by participating in a podcast, and that includes you, listeners. This is why this topic is of such interest to myself and Angelica, and why we can't think of a way to kick off our podcast series by giving you all the DL on LDs and social skills.
We also think this would be an interesting conversation because having what constitutes good social skills is ever changing. As you reach different aspects of your life and experience new things, your social environments will inevitably change. And this certainly doesn't stop once you've reached adulthood. So let's talk about the vast idea of social skills and how they evolve over time.
On the surface, much of the research around people with LDs and social skills feels negative. For example, the opening line on the support page on the topic of social skills from the Learning Disabilities Association of America talks about how the consequences of LDs are not just confined to school and work, but all areas of life. They also share that individuals with LDs may be less observant in their social environment, causing them to take longer to process social behaviors and social cues, which can make an individual present as less mature due to their diagnosis. Similar to this, other reputable sources like the LDAYO, that's the Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario, provides characteristics of individuals with LDs that can include the inability to interpret social cues, poor judgment, the need for immediate gratification, and poor impulse control, all of which can influence one's social abilities. Now, just thinking about that out loud, Angelica, do you think that these characteristics and statements described by the LDAYO accurately describe individuals who have a learning disability?
That's a great question, Anthony. And I feel like it's different for everybody. In my situation, speaking for myself, I feel like it's relatable to me. but also many people experience different symptoms when it comes to social skills. And that's what I feel like it is relatable, but also everybody's different.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely see that. I would definitely concur. While I think there can certainly be a spectrum between what was listed, I don't think that the LDAYO is being inaccurate or slanderous, and I think those are very common things that people with LDs tend to experience, particularly when they're younger, just because when you're younger in general, you're still figuring out a lot of things, social cues included, and how to get along with others included. But I think having an LD can certainly complicate that and exacerbate certain aspects. So, yeah, and that just happens to be the reality.
I agree.
Out of the characteristics that I just listed, did any particularly stick out to you?
Definitely, one of them that I can talk about is social cues. I feel like for me as a kid growing up, it was hard for me to interact with anybody. I always been played by myself. I was in the corner. I just grabbed something and I would just work on that activity. For me, socializing was very difficult at such a young age that I feel like I had some sort of, social anxiety now that I know what it means today. So I did have that situation where I look back and I wasn't very social. I was very nervous. I didn't want to be around people.
Yeah, I can definitely see. I was going to say the same characteristic, but for different experiences. I certainly went through periods like you described of isolation and just feeling like there's me and then there's everybody else. And to be honest with you, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot better, and maybe doing projects like this helps. But I also think there was a period in the middle there where I kind of acted as I would, and how people interpreted that, I would mold myself after. So, for example, sometimes how I would interact with people, because it was different, others thought it was funny and intentional. And rather than fighting that, I would just kind of roll with it because while that's still acceptance, I'm still getting to interact with people. Other times, I think sometimes people would think that I was being, for lack of a better word, strategic. And you just get used to molding yourself after what people want. And while it sounds great in the beginning because, I'm finally getting what feels like social acceptance, it becomes exhausting after a while. It just becomes like you're hiding who you are. You're constantly guessing how to act instead of just being genuine. And it definitely begins to take its toll on you. Did you find that in terms of feeling isolated and feeling different, that it intensified as you got older, or it maybe changed in a different way?
For sure, as I got older, a lot changed. It's crazy because I look back and I think throughout my elementary school years and high school, like I can say it was tough, and having this learning disability and not knowing what you're going to do or how to, or trying to figure out what my future is going to be like. I definitely did. Oh my gosh, how do I say this? Like, it was really tough for me to socialize with other people. And also, let's not forget, high school has a lot of pressure. So you have to deal with that on top of your learning disability. And you're trying to navigate and trying to figure out the person that you're becoming. So socially, it did become difficult for me. And I found how getting a part-time job has really helped me with my communication skills, being able to talk to people, because now you're getting paid to talk to people, help them out, use your customer service skills, learn from that. So I felt like having that part-time job has really enhanced my communication and being able to be social, because in a high school setting, it's really hard for everybody. Like, you're trying to fit in, you're trying to find your friends, you're trying to get through school and everything else that you're going through as a teenager, that all of a sudden it's like, how do I navigate this? So definitely experiencing new environments is very difficult for me, having this learning disability, even a new job, new teams, like everything, it can get difficult and really hard. But, I find having that part-time job pretty much created that foundation for me to learn to talk to people.
I really appreciate that answer, Angelica. And it's quite funny that you say that, because I would add that I felt the same when I first started working, but that changed over time. I think I flourished in my early jobs because for the first time, in terms of how to socialize, I had parameters. Most of what we learn, it's implicit, it's learned, and it's kind of not said out loud. Whereas, especially if you're starting jobs that, for adolescents, for youth, tend to be more manial in nature, so you're following tasks as opposed to taking more charge in the planning yourself, there's clear guidelines on what you can and can't do. And I distinctly remember feeling, oh, I wish school can be like this. I wish so many different aspects of my life could be like this. It felt like I was really being fulfilled. Funnily enough, though, as I got older, and obviously this depends on the career path you take, but because I became more involved in the planning process, there was more of a learning curve with that as well, because with that more involvement in the planning process came different kinds of socialization, different kinds of environments, and having to re-navigate in a way. It was much easier to deal with in the school years because I was older, but if I'm being honest, it was still definitely a struggle.
But everyone struggles with that, and everyone has that similarity. But I feel like for you and I, it just becomes 10 times harder because then you're trying to figure out, like, I remember talking to people and I would stutter at the beginning because I just didn't know how to wrap my head around it and how to just, like, how do I just talk to a stranger? And then when strangers would talk to me, it was like, okay, don't talk to me sort of look. And you just, like, I feel like it's just become so difficult. The anxiety builds up, the pressure, and it's hard to just let it go, and it takes practice. So I agree, like, starting a job at a young age and learning how to communicate and be in the service industry or in the retail industry, whatever it is, it really helps you kind of build that confidence and you learn from others. And for me, working there was more of an acceptance because I wasn't finding the acceptance at high school. So I found it at a part-time job and I was able to develop those skills and learn things that I never thought I would ever learn. So I love that I was able to have that opportunity. And even today, being in the construction industry and being a woman in construction, you definitely need to speak up. And, you got to hold down that position and you got to show them what you're worth. So it really helps. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot mentally and emotionally because you just want to be that social butterfly, right?
Right, and you found that these early jobs in particular started you on a path where you had more confidence in yourself and you were able to exude that in the workplace and otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And, by the time grade 12, I think I was like, you know what? I just pick the people that I want to be with. I do the classes that I'm doing. I asked for help. I advocated for myself. And if it was because of that job, I was able to do that.
Interesting. Very interesting. I guess if I had to add something to this, in terms of the other characteristics listed, such as poor judgment, need for immediate gratification, and poor impulse control, one of the things that I struggled with was having a negative experience for the first time. Now, when I say negative, I mean an experience that's still a normal part of life, but it still makes an impact on you. I have several groups of longtime friends where we've known each other for over 20 years now. However, I remember, and I was much older, having the first instances of, oh, okay, now we're done schooling. We're not seeing each other every day. We have to put more of an effort to see each other, and we're all going on different life paths. And stemming from that, sometimes people are going to grow into completely different people, and conflicts can arise. Now, differences are healthy. Even conflict, to an extent, is healthy if you deal with it in a healthy way, which I really struggled with doing in the beginning. If it was very anxiety-inducing and uncomfortable, and I think I really didn't want to admit that to myself and others, and that further exacerbated it. So what I'm trying to say here is I definitely can relate to the feeling of wanting that immediate gratification that, no, things are staying the same, especially if the friends, you've known them for a long time. And in case anybody listening is in that situation, what I would personally recommend is just working to be more honest with yourself and for those friends. I think that was a big step in the healing process for me, and I think that can certainly be help for the healing process for others as well.
Thank you for sharing that experience, because a lot of people can relate to you out there, and it's great that we're sharing our personal experiences and hoping that others can, communicate with us and share their stories with us, because this is definitely something that we all struggle with, right? Social skills is a tough one, and it's definitely hard, like you said, between friendships, even family, there's a lot happening.
Yeah, and social skills is just that. It's a skill. I think there's this impression that when you're a highly sociable person, that first of all, it all comes naturally, and second of all, that you don't have to continuously work at it. And that's not true. So a bit about my personal life. I attend weekly meetings where essentially people who want to work on their public speaking skills gather in a community center and they support each other. They take turns delivering speeches, evaluating each other, and things like that. However, there are some members there that every time I've seen them go up, I think, wow, their speech skills are flawless. The way they deliver, everything is just so compact. And then after, when I talk with them, I learned that they've been there for maybe 15 years. They've been coming to these meetings, maybe even longer than that. And one day I asked one of them, well, is it because of the social aspect? Like, do you like the people here? Like, because skill-wise, like, you're clearly not at a deficit. You're really good. And I'll never forget, one of them turned to me and said, Anthony, how many hockey players do you know that as soon as they get to the NHL, they stop practicing? And I said, well, none. And he goes, okay, well, what about football players when they go to the NFL? And I said, again, none. And he says, well, for me, public speaking is my sport. It's my skill that I like to work on. And that means I'm either continuously trying to improve, or even if I'm at a level that I think is optimate, this is my practice area. This is my safe place. And because I know that it's not limitless, I can keep going and working at it to stay as good as I can. And I think that's very analogous to what we're discussing here, that social skills are not innate. And sometimes, yes, there are people who they're more of that, extrovert persona. But that certainly doesn't mean that can go away, that can't go away if you don't work at it, right? So it's just, yeah.
I like what you said there. And also to add to that, like, we hear a lot about what's an introvert and extrovert. And I feel like now, because of the amount of, how do I say this, like the push that I give myself to try new things and challenges, could say I'm both. There's sometimes I just want to be an introvert, and then there's some days I'm just going to be an extrovert. And I can say that at work, I am an extrovert. I'm talking to everybody. I have to build those relationships. I got to see what's going on. And it's just towards the end of my day, I'm pretty much drained, and I get home and I just want to be an introvert because I got to recharge my energy. So yeah. And it's like you said, and I love that example that you picked out from your experience. And it's true. You just got to keep practicing, and it's really hard. It is really hard. Yeah. Nothing's going to be easy, but, definitely if you're interested in something, if you're passionate about something, you're definitely going to succeed into it, right? And that's part of the social aspect.
Angelica, I'm very, very happy that you just brought up the introvert and extrovert dichotomy, because getting back to what we just said about being able to constantly practice, I think if people have an idea of themselves as more of an introvert or an extrovert or a mix, as you said, that's great. But if I'm being honest, in my personal opinion, sometimes I think people attach themselves to those labels as a way of, even if not deliberately, avoiding stepping out of their comfort zone, or at least broadening their horizons. And what I mean by that is, okay, so for my specific LD diagnosis, I really struggle with organization, being able to place things in the right areas. And because of this, I usually have to work harder. I have to come up with alternative ways of remaining organized and being diligent in that regard, and doing trial and error of what works best for me, etc. The first step in disarming my disability from affecting my life negatively in that way is understanding that, yes, I'm different. Yes, I'm going to probably struggle with this than most people. And here, then, can I work on doing different ways of doing this? To me, that's very similar to, it's okay if you're more of a natural introvert, but I also think that you shouldn't limit yourself and say, okay, well, I'm never going to go to these types of events because as an introvert, I would struggle. I can do these events only because I'm an introvert, and vice versa if you're an extrovert. People have off days. It's okay to have a social mistake. Everyone has made a social mistake where, we thought that joke was going to be really funny and it was silent, or we meant one thing one way and it was interpreted in a completely different way. It's part of life. It's part of humanity, and it's part of interacting with people. So again, I think it's okay to have labels for yourself and have a little capsulized way that, okay, this is how I think of myself and my personality with the world. But as long as it's not to the point where you almost cage yourself, mentally, right? So that's kind of why I like that you brought up an introvert and an extrovert, just as concepts.
100%. I love what you said there. You're full of experiences and knowledge, Anthony.
Oh, thank you. I wonder who I'm picking up that from, Angelica. So I guess speaking of experiences, we can, proceed with how others have relayed their experiences in terms of social skills and learning disability. We want to give a shout out to everyone that was able to provide answers to us for the survey that we put out. And we'll certainly probably be doing a bit more surveys as time goes on. So if you missed your chance, do not worry. You will definitely have another chance to participate.
So let's bring up these results. The question was, what social skills have you found challenging? Option 1, problem solving. Option 2, making and keeping friends. Option 3 was self-advocacy. And I really like seeing these results and how they were able to overcome this challenge. One person wrote, for problem solving, I started working on figuring out better ways to problem solve and get help from others. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that definitely goes back to being able to be honest with yourself, and therefore the easier it is to be honest with yourself, the easier it will be to be honest with others. I know for a lot of us, we don't like to feel wrong. We don't like to feel that we were going down a completely different path than we originally had mentally, but it's a necessary first step. And I think the more you do it, the more it gets easier to do as time goes on. And Angelica, as I'm sure you can mention too, it's ironic, but it's kind of a skill in its own regard. I think say you're at the workplace, I think the boss really appreciates the worker that can be honest when things aren't going right, whether for themselves or others equally, as opposed to the one who always says, oh no, everything is perfect, it's all nice, thank you very much. And it's the same in other realms, right? So that public speaking thing that I brought up to you, for example, that only works because the team respects each other, but at the same time is not afraid of constructive criticism to both themselves or the others. Can you imagine what group it would be if just, no matter the speech, everyone just clapped and said that was the greatest speech we ever heard, please come again next week? The group wouldn't foster at all. So, I can definitely see why people put that down.
For sure, definitely. And the other comment to that problem solving is taking a moment to reflect and understand others' perspectives. And that's really a hard one, to be honest, taking a moment to reflect. And I think a lot of us tend to really just forget to do that. And I know it's tough. Like, there's moments in my career where I had to really just pause and think, what did I do wrong? what is it that they're trying to tell me? And sometimes I take it negatively because, I put so much work and effort into it, and all of a sudden it's not the correct thing, or maybe I did do something wrong. Maybe I said something that was wrong. And sometimes just to take that moment to reflect and understand, it gets hard on you. You start to go through those emotions in your mind, and you're trying to understand, like, what is it? What is it? Like, what is it that you're trying to tell me? What did I do wrong? So you try to dissect every little piece of things. Sometimes I overthink things, I'm not going to lie. And, for me to just take that moment to reflect is something that I can do now. I have a journal. I write things down. If I'm having a horrible day, I will write it down. How can I make it better for the next time? How could I solve the situation the next time? The great thing is that now I have more resources, and I can turn to a stranger who is my therapist and say, hey, let's do a video call and let's take this moment to reflect on the situation and understand it from a different perspective. So taking that moment to reflect is very important, and it kind of reflects back to being able to accept that there was a problem in the first place, and how do we make that change, right? So for me, definitely, I've learned to take the time to reflect. And sometimes, again, I'm an overthinker, so it will kind of go back and forth in my mind for the next couple of days, especially more in the workplace, because, with having this learning disability, it's like you want to still prove to your team that you can do anything. And we all make mistakes, which we have to accept that, but it's harder for me to accept that because you want to make it perfect. And I'm not saying I'm a perfectionist, but I just feel like you just want to give it your all. And, when there's a mistake, I have to really, be able to reflect what I've done, or if there's a situation, how do I fix it? So I like that. Taking a moment to reflect and understand others' perspectives.
Angelica, I really appreciate your honesty, because I completely agree with your sentiment. A commonality you and I obviously share is we do this ambassador work, and we're clearly motivated for both personal reasons and reasons for wanting to be there for people in the community. I guess to add to that as well, I've been told on more than one occasion that I have empathy skills and that I am good with connecting with people. And the reason I bring that up is precisely when I'm in a situation where I inevitably say something that might hurt someone, or I had an intention and just didn't go as planned. Social-wise, it's really difficult to admit that with yourself, right? Our brains are wired to avoid danger at all costs and negative feelings. So when those feelings come about, I find maybe it's my brain that has an added sense of it, but I really try to, like a lot of people, rationalize and almost tell myself, well, maybe this person, they overreacted. And even if that's true, it doesn't escape the reality that I still had actions that didn't pan out. And you can't go back and change what was just done. You can definitely show remorse, don't get me wrong, but you can learn from it and behave in a different way in the future. And I guess how this kind of ties into our theme about LDs and social skills for this episode is, it's a process, guys, not an event. The single small step is the beginning to the 1,000 meter sprint, so to speak. We could all I think it's a lot easier when you view this as, okay, I'm sometimes going to fumble, but as long as I get back up and keep going, I can be sociable and learn to interact with others in a meaningful way in my own right.
Love that. Love that. So let's move on to the next one, which is making and keeping friends. The first one that someone wrote in was exposure therapy. I went out and did stuff outside of my comfort zone, saying hi to strangers. Now that is something I can definitely relate to. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, saying hi to strangers was very hard socially. It was just like, I could feel the buildup inside of me. It was like my body shaking, the nerves are kicking in, the pressure was in there, my hands are shaking. It was just a terrible feeling. And I remember my parents culturally growing up, it's more like you got to say hi to everybody no matter what. That was engraved in my mind. My dad was giving us the lecture why it's important to say hello and thank you and goodbye and be respectful. And it's just so hard for me just to go up to somebody and say hello. Or if someone said hello, I would just say hi, and that was it. So definitely exposure therapy, going out there is definitely a tough one. Like I remember last year I went to a networking event by myself.
Wow.
By myself. I usually grab somebody who's another small business owner and say, just come with me, just come with me. You always need that buddy or friend. And Anthony, it was just a terrible, terrible feeling. I felt like the same feelings I had when I was a kid. It was kind of like bringing back those memories. And it was just like, oh my gosh, what do I do here? There's a place full of people. I'm here to support my friend who's hosting this event. And I just have to go up to somebody and say hello. And that's what I did. And it's just like, it was hard. My hands were sweating. I was shaking. I was like, I couldn't even feel my legs because you're at a networking event by yourself. And how do you do it? And funny enough, I interviewed somebody a week before on my podcast, which she wrote a book about networking, but she explains how to do it by yourself. And I took whatever she had in that book and I was like, hey, I'm ready to go to this event. I'm gonna crush it. Nope, it's just total opposite. Everything that I've learned from her in this book literally flew out the window. And I just had to like embrace the moment, go up to small business vendors to kind of work up that courage. And you know what? It was a great experience, even though it was horrifying, but I survived. I ended up making 5 new friends there. And, it's definitely hard. It's not easy. And I love that idea. And another idea I would suggest is when you're in a lineup, grabbing a coffee or waiting for your meal, just turn around, create that connection. Just say, hey, how's it going? How's your day? So I've learned to develop that, and just asking them how their day is just more than enough. And I learned that a lot through my retail experience too, because even though sometimes it's a lot about the sale, it's creating that connection. So you just want to say, hey, how's it going? And then eventually they're going to spend money from you, but it's just saying hello in the first place is the hardest part. But I've developed a lot. I've learned a lot. And having a small business and working in the industry that I am really helps you develop those skills to really get out there and just say hello to strangers.
That's a very interesting insight, Angelica. And I also think it ties into what we can discuss about culture too. While I know listeners can possibly be from all over the world, I should state that since me and Angelica are based in the Greater Toronto area, and for those that don't know, it's obviously a more urban environment, generally sparking up small conversations, be it in coffee shops or commuting spaces, generally doesn't happen. So I imagine, Angelica, the people, they're not even apprehensive about it. Maybe they're confused in the beginning. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. It's just that they're not used to it. And as another example, you brought up with your parents always encouraging you to say hi to people. Why? Because that's prevalent in their culture. And it's prevalent in many cultures. But that just goes to show how far different things can be. So even if let's say you have a social experience that's technically a failure, it might not actually be a failure. It might just be a cultural mismatch or an environment that you're completely unaccustomed to. And I guess to give my own example of this, so my family's family business is an Italian restaurant that my dad and my uncle have been operating. I think they started a month before I was born. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of times during PA days and things like that while I was in school, I would accompany my dad to the restaurant. And I remember even as a child being very confused with, well, how am I supposed to act? Because there's no other children here. And a lot of times the other adults would kind of look and say, why is a child here by himself? So naturally they would strike up conversations. And again, I was unsure, what social cues do I follow? What do I talk to with these people? Because there's obviously a difference in age and therefore, interest. And how do I react in that? Now, eventually I kind of got better at it and I got used to it. But I remember feeling very unsociable at the time, not because I was, fearful or I thought, oh, I'm in a negative space. I was just confused. I didn't know how to react, right? And I said, what's the path that I carve for myself here? So, yeah, I like that you were aware of that going into the networking event, but rather than stopping and slowing down and saying, well, and being hesitant, you took the opposite approach. You dove in with both hands and it ended up working in your favor.
And obviously it wasn't easy. And the one thing
I think it was.
No, and I would suggest just to take a breather, just look around you and kind of see what is the purpose of you being there. Yes, it was me supporting my friend, but there was many people that I was able to meet from different paths of life. And it was one of those things where I said, I have to do this. How am I going to develop and be that person that goes to networking events and meet all these people? Because I want to be like them. I want to be able to have those skills and perfected to be friends with everybody. Well, you know what I mean, not friends, but being able to create those connections, because you never know when you're going to need them in the future or be able to help somebody and give them a referral or whatever the case may be. So I had to kind of just implement that. And this is like a goal that I wanted to achieve and be able to accomplish. So definitely difficult. On to the next one. I started to show up more for my friends, which in return showed them that I care and respect them. I love this one.
Yeah, I think it's such a simple step, but it can be so impactful. Again, most of us, we lead such busy lives that sometimes we take for granted how others perceive us. And just a simple gesture like that, showing up for your friends, being present, it really reinforces the admiration and the need for connection that people can have for each other.
And there's different ways to be there for your friends. You could just be a listening ear. I've been known for the person that people call to, and this is everywhere throughout my whole career, with my friends, with family. People just call me and they just want to just talk it out, and I'm just listening. I refer myself to the light post when there's a bench. The person comes to the bench and I'm that light post and I'm just listening, So it's amazing what you can do when you're just there to listen to them. And that's where I felt like for me, for my friends, is being able just to listen. And, I agree with you. In return, you're going to show them that you care and you respect them. But it is difficult. Sometimes it's really hard. And, baby steps. Ask them, what do you need? Do you want to just talk? You don't have to say anything to them. You just sit there and listen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think just slow and steady wins the race. And yeah, as long as you remain diligent and wanting to learn and just being there for your friends in a way that both works for you and ways that they're comfortable, can really work wonders in broadening your capacity for social skills.
So let's move on to the last one, self-advocacy. Practice. Baby steps are still in progress. Just what you were talking about, Anthony.
Yeah, right on.
And the other one is understanding what I deserve in school and then the workplace. And the last one is being assertive. So all these three with self-advocacy, I feel like it's definitely on point. It's a process. It's a lot of work and time. Understanding what you need in school and the workplace, being able to speak up and being able to say, hey, I need accommodations. I need help. The first thing is I need help, and being assertive. With all these 3 points, it's definitely relatable to self-advocacy. And, it's a process.
Yep, and it's a skill that you learn and build. Social skills in general are skills that you learn and build. They're just as important to foster within someone as in academic skills or skills related to your job. I also, as we've kind of alluded to, personally believe that they can be a protective factor in good mental health. If you understand yourself, it can be, I believe, a little bit easier to notice when maybe there's some issues that you're feeling. And if you're more comfortable seeking help, well, you can seek help for things much easier as well.
Let's get into some tips to strengthen social skills. Review your child's social interactions and examine what occurred for both successes and errors. Look at causes and effects between behavior, messages, and the reactions of others. Explore what both verbal and nonverbal messages meant and what feelings may have been felt by both your child and others involved. Ask questions like, "What did you think you did?" Or, "What did you think you could do?" If they don't, tell them the likely outcome. Use a conversation or a TV show or movie to provide some examples of social interactions to review with your child. Encourage your child to play with others. Facilitate play dates, but don't impose another child on yours. Everyone has preferences in regards to whom they want to play with. For nonverbal LDs, provide verbal explanations. It is important to verbally explain social concepts and give rules and reasons for the social skills. Explain abstract terms such as friendly and cooperative. Teach body language and facial expressions and the meanings they have. Be empathetic when social failures occur. Instead of criticizing, try saying things like, "I know you didn't realize that," or "I know you didn't want such and such to happen to you." Use these incidents as learning opportunities. Remember that social failures are usually due to a deficit, so be patient and not reprimanding. Consider professional interventions. A social skills program or a counseling can be useful in helping promote social competence.
That is a great list of suggestions, Angelica. And while I'm not a parent myself, and I do not place any blame on my own parents for this, because at the time we didn't know, I didn't know until I was diagnosed that, and when I was 13, that I was different. Growing up, I think my parents, even if they didn't sense that I had any neurological differences, I think they learned from an early age that maybe I socialized differently in contrast with my three siblings that they were also helping to raise. And while that was good, I guess if I had to give some constructive criticism retroactively, a lot of times my parents would point out something that I do differently and what could be maybe done better, but they wouldn't explain the why behind it. And to be honest with you, I think as I got older, I became a little bit resentful of that. And yes, part of that was obviously adolescence, and well, it's a different topic in and of itself, and there's obviously normalcy in that. I also think the resentment stemmed from, oh, no, but sometimes I'm going and I'm behaving that way and I'm getting a different reaction. It kind of touches upon what I used to, when I talked about before, how I used to mold myself. If people thought, oh, I'm the funny guy because I'm different, well, I'll just become that and I'll get acceptance. Or if I'm a little bit odd but people still like it, then I'll become the oddball and get acceptance. But I'm not being told, no, the friendships are flourishing, so why are my parents just shutting it down any chance that they get? And just looking at this from the perspective, you're a parent today and you're trying to increase the social skill ability of your child with a learning disability, I would just really stress it's great to try to put up parameters and try to explain, but just always try to have the why behind it. Why we tend to socialize this way, and how there can be room for growth between that.
And also providing that encouragement. Like for me, with my parents, they were very encouraging in a way of, I was learning another language, so I was brought up speaking Spanish first and then English. So it was a little bit difficult because culturally it was, you have to speak Spanish. You walk into those doors, it is Spanish. You leave those doors and you can speak whatever you like. But that was culturally, I know for them, they were trying to adapt to this Canadian lifestyle. And now, I did have to give them an ultimatum of them having to learn another language, because if something were to happen, then how would they defend themselves? So I'm very proud that I was able to, speak up to them and say, you got to learn English. I can't be your child translator. So, I love that they were able to do that and overcome those challenges, but also they really put it into me that, this is what you've said. How do we change it? How do we, they really pushed me to really become that social butterfly. And now as a parent to a child who's delayed speech, and we're trying to figure out what is it, what's causing this. When I read through this list of tips, I was just like, you know what? I'm doing the same thing. I'm examining the interactions. It's the body language, trying to explain to my child, this is not what we do. How are you feeling? Giving him the options to kind of see, where is he developing? What do I see in that little brain of his, and trying to figure things out. So body language has been a big thing, facial expressions. And, as a parent now and trying to figure out what he is going through, it's tough, but, it's a practice that we do every day. And I want to give my son more than what my parents could have given me, because back in the day, there wasn't much resources, and I wasn't able, because there was a lot more stuff going on in my personal life at the time when I was diagnosed. So definitely these are good tips, and half of this list I'm doing today right now. So, I'm glad there is a list out there to help others as well.
That's really insightful, Angelica. I really appreciate your input on this. I guess if I had to add some tips that I brought in, and I'll explain where I generated this from. Although I'm not a parent myself, I have frequently done volunteer and vocational opportunities where I'm hopefully inspiring, but also instructing and evaluating youth and children. And some of the tips that I've come across along the way in terms of socialization would definitely be, in terms of relationship building, you can practice what is known as I messages. So for those that don't know, let's say you're in a disagreement with someone, we tend to sometimes add a lot of what's called baggage. So, well, you always do this, and this always happens because you ... And while it's okay to vent those frustrations, putting you puts a target on the other person, whereas saying, I feel that when this is done, and stating your case, it comes across as a lot more friendly and open to being able to work something out, as opposed to just straight on conflict. Also, in terms of exploring emotions, we would suggest, particularly for parents of younger children, to work on the children being able to identify emotions. They should be able to name the emotion that they're feeling, and this can definitely work in terms of them recognizing when changes are occurring and just providing that window of them to really think about how they want their next action to be, for sure.
Adding on to more tips, self-esteem, avoid using negative words to describe yourself. Every day, state one thing you like about yourself. Recite positive self-affirmations. For self-advocacy, know what you want and what you deserve. Believe in yourself. Learn how to use your voice. Problem-solving, conflicts, resolutions, and sportsmanship. Talk things out. Celebrate other wins the way you celebrate your own. Definitely great tips to really get that mind going and see what you want to achieve. The one thing that really sparks to me the most is avoid using negative words to describe myself. So I've been on this journey of self-development, and I can say this kind of touched home to me in a way of I used a lot of negative words to describe myself, and it's been a progress of trying to make things into a positive. Like, for example, I can't do it today. I can't. I'm emotionally drained. I can't do it. And I have to stop saying I can't, and I've learned how to say I will, and I will try. All the time, it's one of those things I have to clue into myself and say, I will try, I can. I will try, I can. And it takes practice. It's really hard, but you know what? You'll start feeling better about yourself every single day. It's definitely difficult, but it's a long journey, but it's going to work.
Yeah, what a great message. And I certainly share similarities with you. I guess if I had to add one tidbit to that, though, it would be, don't feel failure. It's okay to fail as long as you get back up. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think failure can be your greatest teacher in a lot of instances. And that goes, obviously, whether it's educational, work-wise, and, of course, social skills.
I agree, definitely. We have to recognize those failures, and how do we change it? How do we make it into a positive? Because sometimes our greatest failures ends up opening doors for opportunities, like it's happened to me before. And I'm not going to lie, there is jobs that I struggled in, and then they let me go. And you know what? It brought up other opportunities. So, things happen for a reason. There's a reason why. Maybe it's telling us it's not meant for us. It wasn't for you. But I will have this door open for you because I know you have the potential for this one. So it's okay. There's always something better. My parents implemented that in my brain. It's okay. It's okay. You just move on. There's going to be another opportunity. That's what my parents have always told me. And, I carry that with me because it's true. You just never know. And there's a reason for it. Don't blame yourself. Don't be negative when that happens because there's always a better opportunity. Just think of it wasn't meant for me. It just didn't work out. But there is another opportunity out there for you.
Right on. And there can also be places where it can be safe to fail. And specifically what I'm thinking of is peer support groups. And I know that we tend to offer a lot of them at the LDAYS, among other places, because they're effective. It goes to the tried and true formula of a lot of times I think when we fail, we feel alone and we feel that we're the only ones. And the beautiful thing about peer support groups, besides sharing characteristics with other members of the group, is it's okay to let your vulnerable self out. And that includes the deficits. And you might be surprised to find that not only do people still accept you, but they might even share those deficits as well. And I think that's definitely a key as to why peer support groups, be it for learning disabilities or other things that people have in common, be it issues or maybe even things that aren't issues. It could be shared hobbies, shared interests. It's because they're safe environments where people are relatable and they're okay to feel like their true selves. Sometimes those might be the only places in one's life where they feel that they can be comfortable in an environment like that.
I absolutely agree with you. And I know it's hard to get into any support group out there, but, joining in on the LDAYS peer support group. I remember I've joined one a couple years ago, and it was just amazing because you were able to relate yourself to the people around you into that group. And even though it was virtually, I just felt like a huge connection with everybody. And I really enjoyed being part of that group. And I can say it's very helpful. It's insightful. You can just, share your thoughts and feelings, and, people will help you chime in of how to, juggle something that you're struggling with, and, how to resolve a situation that you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't get my mind around this. How do I proceed with a project, whatever it is? So we're all going through similar situations when it comes to our learning disability, and a support group is great. There's adult support groups, there's parent support groups, social skills programming, there is SOAR, summer camps, and more.
Yeah, absolutely. The list is endless and the sky is the limit. Yeah, Angelica, definitely. I think this has been quite an eye-opening conversation. It feels very riveting. It's been great to have a discussion with you and just get all these different perspectives. It's funny how varied the journey can be, even though you and I, we both obviously share that. There's so many twists and turns between our stories and our perspectives on this, and I've certainly learned a lot today. I hope you've learned a bit from me, and I hope the listeners have learned from us and clearly benefit from us. We would like to thank everyone for tuning in, and we would also like to especially thank those that participated in the Instagram poll prior. We really like that we were able to get answers on this, and we really feel that it added a lot to the conversation.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channel to get notifications on new episodes, which will be released every second Thursday of every month. That's right, every second Thursday of every month. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will give you the DL on LDs and transitions with a possible surprise guest speaker. I am so excited.
Me too.